Thank you for joining what is the fifth in a series of online presentations hosted and produced by the gallery's directors Stephanie Buhmann and Amanda Konishi, gallery registrar and manager. Please visit the gallery website to view all archived exhibitions and curatorials. Of note are our recent artist talks with Ilana Manelson, Belint Sacco, and Tara Geer. Three compelling conversations that complement their online exhibitions on Artsy and the gallery website, www.jasonmccoyinc.com. This evening marks the height of a 2-week festival that coincides with National Poetry Month, and to date, the release of 5 poetry films by Laurie Heller Marcus and her online painting exhibition, The Wind Orders the Word, hosted on Artsy. 5 is a good number for us tonight, as we also celebrate the 5th volume of interviews by art historian Stephanie Buhmann. Rhineland Studio Conversations represent an ongoing series of books documenting contemporary women artists. To date, over 80 chapters have captured their art, their life, their practice, and serves as an important archive, all published by the Green Box. Tonight, we not only look forward to Stephanie's 6th volume of Studio Conversations, but to Laurie's 6th poet film, Daughters. Literature, especially poetry, often requires slowing one's spoken and thought process to enable our imagination and the nuance of the word. Looking at art requires much the same. The confessional poetry of Emily Dickinson and Sylvia Plath hold us in one world. The confrontation of Sharon Olds, another, and the cutting intelligence of Siri Hustved and Donna Tartt, yet another. Laurie Heller Marcus is difficult to define. As a painter and filmmaker, it would be easy to describe her as an outsider artist. Eugene Gabrashevsky comes to mind. When I first saw her poet films, it brought to mind the works of the dancer-filmmaker Pooh Kay. Although nothing alike, both artists share the wonderment, clarity, and honesty of a child mind, a willingness to experiment, or in Laurie's words, a binary message to live, to die, a primitive response to a primary world. Describing Laurie in these terms is at best a reference point, much as it might be to compliment her in a way one might talk of Alice Neal, not by comparison, of course, but their response to their environment, the formation of their character and intellect, certainly their humanism. Laurie is a mother, a school teacher, an inventive artist, and like a few of us, at certain times in our life, stopping at a crosswalk and pondering the symbolism of a traffic light, or as she describes the normal occurrence of going off a rock at 104th Street for a swim in the Hudson River. These acts, this personality, is what we value in an individual seeking an emotional truth, and Laurie is just that. Last night, Laurie posted a poem entitled Passing, which I would like to read. Why is Ronald, a young man, his mind stewing in ambition, his formless red shoes walking him toward or away from his deepest dream? Passing the Venus, lost, bewildered, unable to decipher the concrete landscape. Without noticing that, if there were no illusion of depth, their hands would touch, and each would wake up from their dream, the space between them, no longer unbridgeable. It is with real pleasure that Jason McCoy and I introduce Laurie Heller Marcus in conversation with Stephanie Buhmann and Amanda Konishi. Welcome, Laurie.
Welcome, and thank you so much. That was really beautiful, very touching for me. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, Laurie. Thank you for being here, and thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. Such a pleasure to discuss this body of work. And just as a background, we met Laurie late last year, through our drawing challenge, an initiative that Amanda and I conceptualized last year during the pandemic. And Laurie submitted some work and we fell in love with it and started a conversation, which has now turned into an online art exhibition in these beautiful poetry films that I hope you have had the chance to see, and if not, you will tonight. Laurie, maybe to begin our conversation, we should start with the drawings and the paintings before we go to the films. Stephen threw out a word that was, I think, rather fitting: wonderment. You create a world of wonderments, and maybe you can tell us how long you have been making these works, how often you work. Do you work night and day, and about your personal symbolism?
Oh, that's a big
loaded.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was, I'm so grateful to be here. I've been making art my whole life. Since I was like maybe 7, I just remember thinking I'm going to be an artist. I remember thinking I'm going to be an artist or a writer. And it, like, I don't know how at 7, but I knew that like Picasso and Shakespeare were like the ultimate, right? So those were my two muses. But I've been drawing my whole life, painting whenever I can. And I now, because of my regular job, I work like maybe 9 at night to 2 in the morning, but that's like my schedule now. I feel like if I don't make art, I don't make it through the next day with any kind of happiness.
There's a catharsis, right? We talked about this a little bit in the last few days, that you keep talking about stories on the inside, interior worlds that have to come out, things that need to be expressed. And you have a daily practice of drawing, but also of writing. There's a lot of creativity that is woven into your day.
Well, it sort of started, I never really intended to be a writer, honestly. My family is rife with writers. They're incredible writers, and I was always a visual artist. But I started keeping morning pages where you just write what's in your mind as quickly as you can, and you do 3 pages. And I was, at the same time, I had these paintings, and I really, they seemed very like symbolic, but I didn't really know what they meant. I just knew that, you know, it felt good to get it out, and it felt like I was working on it, tinkering with the paintings and working on them. But I would put them next to my bed, and one morning, the poem that Stephen just read, that was about the painting, I put it next to my bed, and I really had no idea what it was about. I just like had it, I had to get it out, you know, and I worked on it, and it moved and it changed. And when I wrote about it, all of a sudden it became about, you know, 2 people in 2 separate worlds, and the pictorial space of the plane, of the canvas, keeping them apart, but their hands were really overlapping. It was so interesting. Like, it came out so cleanly. I could never have expected that. So I do that practice of putting work that I'm working on next to my bed. I have a studio in my home, and so I have that freedom. And then sometimes when I wake up, I'll just start writing, and I don't force it, but sometimes it comes. Sometimes it doesn't, but usually if I keep working, something comes up that surprises me.
Just to reiterate, so the poetry came out of the work, out of the paintings, of the drawings, the images you put together, but they were not words you already had in mind while you were making them. It was rather that the next day you woke up and somehow what you had been working on manifested in a different way, in an additional way.
Yeah, that's it. Except now I've, you know, if I like I was writing some poetry, and then suddenly like the idea of doing, I don't think you've seen this one yet, but I did like a Venus of Willendorf coming off, maybe I put it on Instagram, but coming off the half shell. That idea just came right out of the writing. So, I mean, I don't usually have an idea in mind when I make art. I usually kind of let it take me where it's going to. And then if I get into a series, maybe it'll be a little bit more guided. But sometimes like out of the writing, an idea will come, or sometimes out of the writing, I'll change the painting. But this is all recent, actually, since we've been in conversation that, and I even like went back into a painting because of the video, because when I went to film it, it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do for the video. So I went back in and changed the painting for the video, which worked. I mean, because then it was more of what I wanted for the painting. So
that is interesting. So in a way, the video is now influencing the artwork. It's a full circle.
Yeah, I was thinking about it today, like, you know, I was thinking, how could I describe it? And what came up in my mind is an image, and bear with me and I'll give you the image. At the circus, I saw a trick where an acrobat held two ladders, one on each side. And he climbed up the ladder, like one rung on one side and one rung on the other. And he walked up this ladder. He was the whole balancing thing, but, you know, back and forth between the rungs. And now there's almost like a third ladder with the videos. But I think that that's sort of the best metaphor I could give for the way that the painting and the poetry interrelate, is that I'm like in a different place with each step I take, going back and forth.
And that was the quality that struck me right away. And we talked a little bit about, finding a name for what you are making, because it's not really film, it's not really poetry, it's certainly art. But we then decided on poetry films with this, rather simplified description. But they are these unique concoctions, and they have a true charm to them because they're a little bit rough around the edges, and sometimes they're in focus and then slightly out of focus. And, you play with doubling voices at times, but nothing is overproduced. It's not perfected. It's very much like your works. They have this texture to them. The texture that, for example, we see in this piece we're looking at right now, Venus Wears the Pants. There's, kind of an impasto even to the films. Maybe before we go further, you just mentioned the Venus of Willendorf. That is a recurring character. There's also a centaur, so you're quoting Greek mythology at times. And of course, the Venus of Willendorf is a famous object, a fertility figure, 25,000 years old, that was discovered in Austria. And can you explain how these, I want to call them protagonists, came into your work and what they mean to you? Are they a symbolism that has concrete meaning, or are they rather abstract forms in your mind that just shape the composition?
Oh, I love the way you put that. No, they're actually kind of symbols, but if you can imagine symbols without fixed meaning, I think I think that's what I think of them as. Like they have the ability to change their meaning, but they're definitely symbolic. Like the Venus, I think I mentioned that I was an anthropology major as well as an art major in college, and people would lecture and say, like, this is the meaning or that's the meaning. Someone said that they were a way to like they were like a map, like they would be a map for people migrating. But, people can say whatever they want, but the fact is that the Venus figures are still very much alive in our mind, and they take on new meanings for people. I've seen a lot of people use them in different ways because they speak to something very deep in our souls. And, they're mysterious. We don't know if women made them. We don't know if men made them. We don't really know that they are fertility symbols, but we don't really know that, like maybe like for a while I was convinced that the number of rows on the head had something to do with counting the days for fertility. I don't know, maybe men used them. Who knows? Maybe women made them. Nobody really knows. But the fact is, over time, most of the ones I've seen have lost their feet. So there's a sense that, you know, they lack that agency, yet they don't have their feet, but yet they still move us. I don't know.
Mhm.
Isn't that right?
Do you use them perhaps also autobiographically? I mean, do they are they stand-ins for yourself perhaps in the composition?
Yeah, they definitely are. The fact that there's no feet means a sort of lack of agency, and then the fact that I lost you, Stephanie. I can't see you. The fact that they're so overweight, and there's so much like of a sort of women, like an identification with the struggle with weight, and the sense, is that a beautiful thing or is that, you know, a shameful thing? All those things are sort of happening and going through. Stephanie, I lost you on my view. I don't know why. I'm going to go back and
Maybe you have to talk more. Sometimes you can.
Oh, you have to talk. Okay, now I see you.
Amanda, can we go to the image Willowware? This is related to it, but I'm thinking especially of the female head that is floating by itself. And Laurie, maybe we can talk about this piece. This seems to me, especially when you read the poem that accompanies it, kind of like an autobiographical depiction somehow. And I know from our conversations before that Willowware had a very personal meaning. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about the meaning of this particular piece for audience members to get an idea of your very personal interlinked history with your artwork.
So I really didn't realize initially why I was so fascinated by Willowware until I wrote the poem. And the poem, I remember when I was younger, and that there would be like, it wouldn't be a very comfortable home, and I would want to escape, and there'd be a lot of fighting and stuff. And I would look at the plate. We had Willowware at my grandmother's house, and I would look down at it, and the beauty of the pattern became a kind of safe haven for me. The water, the trees, the patterning, the little figures that were always where they should be, the trees that were so beautifully done. So that was really like one of the most important things, like, was I had various places I escaped to. This is just one of them, but it's the one that sort of has been coming up a little bit more lately. It's like this serene, beautiful world. And that doing that painting, I had just gone, it was nighttime, and I'd just gone to the river and went swimming. I have a friend that I swim with there, and it was getting dark, and the sky was like magnificent. There were like airplane tracks through the sky, and the sun was setting, and a big boat, mysterious large tanker, went by far from us. And I like was looking at everything, and it was like this moment of real magic. And I came home and I did this painting, and I realized, like, somehow I've given the meaning from my childhood was Willowware as an escape, but I've like now, like, it's like this beautiful place that's invading my life. It's like Willowware on the Hudson. So instead of me going into it, it's sort of coming into my life. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And this painting just went down really quickly and easily. And a lot of times I kind of go back and forth on things, but it just came up very quickly. It's a drawing, not a painting. Yeah.
Painting on paper.
Painting on paper, yes, it's a painting on paper.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And I just want to recite 4 short lines that are from that poem that accompanies it, since not everybody has it in front of their eyes, but also on our website and on Laurie's website, we made sure that you can find her poems as they are linked to the artwork and to the film. So you can look it up, and we're happy to post the links later in the chat as well. So the poem Will Aware starts with angry voices shifting myself from body into mind. And I think that sums up very well what you're talking about, this kind of escapism that art has offered you when you were a child and now still does, even though perhaps now with a much more positive and optimistic spin. But it seems that nevertheless, that's a through line that I can detect in all of your work. There's often the theme of wandering, immersing yourself, fusing yourself either with the landscape or a state of mind, a transience.
Yeah, and a transience, a transcendence as well, because I always, I see I see the way that where I'm living, it's not just what's on the visible world. It's not imagination. Like sometimes people say you work from your imagination. It's not really my imagination. It's sort of this other reality that exists, like a fairy tale might exist. It has certain universal truths, and you can sort of go to it in any situation and find a comfort or a guidance in it. So I find the working, it's always fascinating. Like during the whole lockdown, I never missed going anywhere. I would just I'm traveling in my mind, I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to sit down and see where my work takes me. So it's interesting how it gives me the ability to make life, find my life mysterious or not symbolic, but meaningful on another level than what's just happening on the outside world. It helps me find something that sort of takes it into a different level. Like everything seems to have meaning on that level. Everything seems to happen for a reason or have some lesson. I don't know if that answers.
Do you look at other artists as well, artists' works as a source of inspiration, or do you see a work as engaging in a dialogue with other artists' works, such as Florine Stettheimer or Charlotte Salomon, for example? Stylistically, I could see that perhaps. Are there any particular references or not consciously?
Well, you introduced me to Charlotte today when you asked about her, and I thought her work was amazing, and I definitely will look more at her work. My eye has been really educated by childhood. In my childhood, I went to MoMA and the Met every weekend, and I saw I think it's very common. Like it was always Picasso, Matisse, and Cezanne when I was younger. Like those were, they're very, and then I really love Gustin, and sometimes I will sort of see, I love the late Gustin, and I see things that I really relate to. But I also like when Stephen said outsider artists, I love outsider artists. I mean, I looked at, I don't think she's really considered an outside artist, but Carol Ramos, and her work just really sends me. I love it. It's just because she creates this world that's so real. And Vuillard, I mean, I think about Vuillard a lot, and people that you wouldn't associate with me, like Morandi. He's such a storyteller in a way, and I love anyone who creates a world that just feels real and full. Henry Darger created a world. It's such a wild world, but it's so real to him. So, I mean, I do see myself in conversation, but I don't see myself as I see myself out, like sort of on the side of the lineage of art history. Like I don't want to, I'm not looking to do something new. I don't know how to explain. I just want to, I love like Sacetta, and when I was in Florence, I saw a Fra Angelico San Marco, the monastery, and he had painted, there were several cells, like all the monk cells had a mural by him, had a fresco by him inside. And there was something about the personal connection with the artwork, like that each monk had their own painting that they looked at, that was all they had. And that personal rapport that you have with a piece of artwork, I think I see myself as kind of more personal and not really so public in that way. Like, so.
To go back to a word that you just mentioned yourself, storytelling, how art can be about storytelling, not in the sense of necessarily a narrative, but telling about a world that is unique to the person who makes it. Do you find that now the films are opening a new path towards this kind of storytelling that a drawing or a painting, a frozen space cannot offer?
I want to say, I know that it's so young, the filmmaking. I don't really know like what it means yet. I really don't. But for me, the frozen image has always been like the center of my world, you know. But I do love making the movies, and I'll stay up till like 3 a.m. trying to do voiceovers and getting kind of really whacked out, doing very strange things and really enjoying it and loving the way they move. But they're so new. I don't really know what they mean yet. They really came up when we were talking about doing a show with the poetry, and you mentioned video. And I was like, well, I know how to make videos for teaching. I can make, and I've made a few stopgap movies that were art movies, but I never used the skills for my own poetry because the poetry was new.
And I love that it's new and that we don't know whether you're going to go on and make them or if that was just a body of work that you enjoyed making. It's sometimes rather exciting to talk about something that is so fresh that it's impossible to be objective. Not that objectivity and art ever goes really together, but you know what I mean. None of us have distance to it. All we know is that we're very excited about it. And I think it would be wonderful to now show your absolute latest film, Daughters. Amanda, if you could have everybody watch it with us. And I would love to invite everyone to give us your feedback, make comments, ask questions. It's easy to type in the chat, and I'm happy to read them to you, Laurie, and convey them. Or with so many people, I think we're quite a few. It's a little bit difficult to raise your hands. It's hard to detect. So maybe the chat is the most clear way. But why not all enjoy of us together now for the first time, this latest film, and then we'll see what we can gather from it.
Daughters. 1. Venus, are you gazing downward in shame or inward in hope? How will you find your way without feet? Must I make them for you? How will I know you without a face? Will you show me yours in a dream? 2. Here's some advice for you, Venus. Partner with a centaur. Then your children can roam on hooves. Your daughters will overrun the world with their joy. With a flower as their compass and the moon as their map. With a flower as their compass and the moon as their map. The weight of their gallop will carve an ebullient melody into the earth. 3. If you could float, looking down, you would see their prints as they canter, stamping a widening asterisk into the curve of the earth, with you firmly planted at its center. Venus, are you gazing downward in shame or inward in hope?
Laurie, I'm going to take one of the first questions. Have you ever written fairy tales before? Or have they influenced your poetry in any way? Your images, perhaps?
It's the funniest question because years ago, my mother is a real writer, she's a really amazing writer. And she and I asked her if we could write a fairy tale together. And we rewrote Sleeping Beauty, but Sleeping Beauty was a man. And it was so much fun. We never published it. I don't know what happened to it, but there was that. And I feel like I would love to, when I was little, my favorite book was a golden fairy tale book. And this one happened to have the most beautiful illustrations. And I would just read that book a lot nonstop. It's interesting, even at that age, I knew the difference between like this marvelous illustration and Matisse's The Piano Lesson. Like I knew they were two different worlds, but I loved them both, you know? And I would love to write fairy tales. I just have, other than that, I haven't done it yet, but the day is young.
Maybe we can talk about the biggest challenges you are facing with this film to give us an idea of the process you have to work through.
With the filmmaking?
With this particular film,
Oh,
were there any particular challenges?
Oh, well, it's a little
or joys? It
but
doesn't have to be challenges, it can be joy.
You know, it's a little embarrassing, but I had mispronounced and misspelled a word, ebullient. I said ebullient, which is the way I've heard it said and spelled, but it's really ebullient. And it just so happened, I didn't tell you this, but I had signed up for some dictionary like word of the day thing. And the day after I signed up, ebullient was the word. And I looked at it and I said, no, it's not spelled that way. It's not pronounced that way. And it was. And I looked at that word and it also really key to me. It was so meaningful because the word ebullient started out as like melting down things, like roiling and boiling and being like something terribly wild and out of control. And now we know ebullient as this sort of champagne bubble of happiness. So it's kind of interesting when you think of that these words have these long lives with many changing meanings too. And so when I'm writing a poem, sometimes I'll look into the history of the word just to sort of see like which word would work better. You know, does it have a Latin-y sound or a Germanic sound or, you know, but I am really an outsider poet. I'm completely self-taught. Yeah.
Has your work always been figurative?
Yeah, I love abstract work. Like I really like Thomas Noskowski. I think his work is so brilliant and he's abstract. And I love like Clifford Still. But to me, they all have kind of stories. It doesn't have to be a visual story, but like you feel the relationships of things in that work in a way that you would feel like the movement in a story. I've done some abstract work from time to time, but never really stayed with it long. I've always wanted to go back into narrative. I've worked from life too, and I really find that very challenging in a good way. But I feel like I want to be in my inside world a little bit more.
How about palette? How do you decide on palette, on your colors?
On my colors? Well, it's not just colors now, but it's materials. I have like, I love certain colors have a story to me, like cadmium versus alizarin. Like, they are like two very different reds, and that they have this kind of story going between them. Or there's certain blues that will work in one place and not another. But lately, I used to work in oil, and then for health reasons, I stopped just because it's not healthy. And I work with acrylic. It's very fast, it dries quickly. I can get a lot of ideas out. But I started working once again with oil on top of the acrylic when it dries, but it's water-soluble oil paint, which I think is really wonderful. And I've been kind of surprised that the color is so much more sensitive than acrylic. Like, you have to, if you have the tiniest drop of something else in it, it shows. So, and palette, like each artwork seems to demand its own palette, but the Venus Wears the Pants, I'd done a painting right before it and every so often I'll just go, I'm going into limited palette mode. It's like I'm going to shoot in black and white or something. Mm-hmm. And that just sets up a whole different set of challenges for me. Also the square format, I never worked in a square format, and some of the artwork is square format. And I just found that I did it for something that I had to do like 8x8 pictures for. That's one of the, like, that's an 8x8. And I found that square kind of compresses the work in a way that I wasn't used to working. So it kind of threw me off kilter, and I like that. So I do that. I've been doing that a little bit too.
And you mentioned that you are a teacher and you have been teaching for a long time. Another question here is, has teaching influenced your work in any way?
Yeah, it has. Well, it's influenced my way of looking at art for sure. Like, I now have over 500 students. Usually in a year I have over 500 students. And so I've come to see that that everyone has a talent. I mean, there are some kids who could just draw a horse in kindergarten right out of their mind, and it's galloping off the page. And you go like, oh, Picasso, that kid can do that. But everyone has a talent, and it's so interesting what a variety and differences they are. And, it's the people who want to develop that make art. If you're interested in it and you need it and you go to it, it doesn't matter what your skill set or your talent or your temperament is in the beginning. You'll find a path that will work for you. And I think I learned that. It's sharpened my eye, and I've sort of learned what works for certain kids. Like, I don't know, this sounds really funny, but I was noticing that certain kids, their collages always look really great. And I realized that they were like sequencing the same colors over and over again in a picture. It's like they had created their own like rainbow, but it was their own colors. And so I sort of brought that up, and a lot of other kids started doing it. And like all of a sudden it was like 500 kids' work took this tremendous jump in terms of visual interest. And it wasn't like I was forcing it on them. It was just like, I noticed this really works. Like, it was like almost like a mathematical question for them. So they really learned something working through it. So, I mean, I loved working with kids. And I think they make art for the same reasons adults make art. And I think their art is very real, you know.
Has digital media influenced your work in any way? Looking, I mean, as we all do nowadays, more at art, also digitally, not just in person.
Yeah. Well, I would say that Instagram has been like wonderful for me because it's allowed me to sort of be out in the world in a way that I wasn't. And looking at it all the time, I feel like it really has educated my eye, but maybe in a very, you know, fast way. And when I go back to a museum and look at something, I have to remind myself that I'm not looking at like 200 pieces of work. I'm just going to like look at one piece and I can stay with one piece. The same way when I work on my own work, I want it to last. I want people to be able to look at it and come back and see different things. I don't want a one-liner. I want something that someone can live with. I mean, I'm not painting for that reason, but I'm hoping that the outcome is it's not a one-liner and people can go into it from different viewpoints and feelings and see different things. I'm not answering your question though, which is
That's okay.
Digital. I mean,
The question is just so you know, share beautiful insight. Don't worry about answering it.
No, but it does change the way you look at. I look at things, and then it doesn't because I don't look at my own work digitally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I mean, I do. I see so much work. Everyone who's on Instagram is getting it's like a visit to a museum, but a fast museum every morning. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you wake up and you look, and there's so much creativity and incredible work that people are doing. It's really a privilege to be able to see.
I agree. And it's certainly what has kept us all engaged in the past year from wherever we were, you know, to have still a conversation, a visual conversation. Would you say that art is a language?
Oh, definitely. And I think art is a language without the verbal language. Like, I don't think in words, like even if I meditate, I can't meditate to a mantra, I have to meditate to breathing. I think that it's its own language. I think that the words are another media and the words can uncover things about art. But yeah, it's a very, and it's a different language for everyone who uses it, just like everyone has a different voice. But I always try to veer away from language with art because I know for me the most successful periods of time I've had have been when I enter flow state, which I hope to do every night, you know, that I work. And then it's like there's no language. It's just, you know, you try to just watch thoughts if they come up, but they don't. But when I'm writing poetry, it doesn't feel like language in a weird way too. It feels like moving paint around or something.
I'm going to read another question. It comes from Sharon. How difficult is it for you to put the outside world at bay to allow yourself a necessary intimacy with your inside world? Does the outside world influence your work in any way?
What a great question. I think for me, when I go into my head, it's such a primary place that I don't allow distractions. I mean, my partner's telling me to do the dishes and I'm not hearing him. So, you know, no, but I mean, I can't go there. Like if I feel like when I enter into a world and I'm using materials and I sort of enter a flow state, that I don't hear voices around me. And one thing that's wonderful is I don't think about what other people are going to think about my work. I mean, maybe I'll do that when I post it, but I never think about it when I'm doing it at all. Like it's just sort of all for me, you know, and I know that sounds selfish, but it's just the way it is. And I'm grateful because I don't hear other people's voices when I'm working.
How do you edit? How do you decide on taking this particular painting or drawing and and going further with it. We're seeing this beautiful wall behind you this whole time where there's multiple works, many I've never seen. And, I'd love to stand there right with you and look at everything.
I wish.
But how do you decide on what to highlight? Is it work that speaks to you in a particular way, or is it about something as traditional as composition, or is it really the ones that pull you into a place that you're not sure of what they mean?
I worked on something last night. Last night I posted it this morning. It's back there. I could show you, but it's like a woman's face and it's like a Venus coming out of her head. And I thought it was a failure. And it was in my failure pile, but I feel indebted to the paper and the actual beginning process. But when I'm working, almost everything I do, almost everything hits a failure point where I think oh, this is really stupid. And that's the best work to keep working on. Like, if I have to put it down for a day or two, but when I pick it up, if I can take a failure and bring it back to life, I feel really good about myself, Like, personally, I'm like, so should I grab it and show you? I mean, I did, well, no, it doesn't matter. But I did this one last night and like, it was in my failure pile, and it looked so, before I worked on it, it looked so hackneyed and so like I was trying to make something and it didn't come naturally. And I just went back on it and it worked out. So almost I would say like 99% of my drawings, I just keep working on till they get to a place that I'm happy with. Some, like the Willow-ware one, like now I'm thinking of it as Willow-ware on the Hudson, but that one just came out like start to finish. Everything I put down worked really well. But a lot of times I kind of like working on a failure because I feel like I can't go any further down, and maybe I can rescue it.
Just a note, I think you should not grab that failed work right now. But why don't we add it to the artsy exhibition, and we'll mark it somehow so that everybody who's here tonight can, if they're interested, see it there. That might make it a little easier than you traipsing off right now, but we'll find a way to share it, okay? Right. Straightforward question from someone else. What inspired your most recent film? Daughters.
Daughters. Oh,
you have
that
daughters.
Might be one of my daughters asking, because my daughters are,
which one? Yeah.
Or maybe it's my son wondering where his son's video is. Yeah. Daughters. I was thinking about the Venus and where she stands. Like my next film that's not done yet that I told you about is to the piece that's actually up right now called The First Venus. And, it's the poem really tells the story of what the painting is. But I think it's this sense of, is the Venus looking downward? Because when you look at the Venus figurine, her face, I don't know if she ever had a face or not, because it's 30,000 or 25,000 years, but she's looking down. And I was thinking, is it shame that she's feeling like, oh, look at me, I've got these big breasts and this big belly and I can't walk? Or is she looking downward in hope? Is she looking inside and thinking, how wonderful, here I am, I've lived so long. So I think what really inspired that is like, is to say, like, look at what this Venus has done. She's had these daughters and they're overrunning the world, and my daughters have all moved out of Manhattan. So it's like they've sort of taken to the four winds and, are living these very full lives. And I think that's what inspired it, was looking at the Venus and wondering what she was feeling, and then I guess superimposing maybe what I'm feeling on top of it. I never really thought about it, so it's a great question.
Beautiful. Well, I would like to cap it right here for us. I'm sure there's more questions, and we're always happy to forward them to Laurie. And we certainly will continue our conversation going forward and continue to share. And Amanda, maybe you can just post a couple links right now before we hang up. But Laurie, has there ever been a dead end in your work where you couldn't find your way out of a certain corner? Because it sounds so optimistic, as if even if the reject pile is there, you just take the work and you're able to resurrect pieces. But has there ever been moments where you doubted everything you've done?
Yeah, there are, and then I do hackneyed work. I feel like I'm grabbing onto something to sort of help me from sinking, and and then it feels like all the doors are closed to me, and the muse has left me, whatever it is, the doors are shut. And then if I keep working, if I just keep working, another door opens and another room opens, and I'm like, wow, I'm in this new place. But I have spent time, but restarting is something that, I have things that are very difficult for me, but restarting is, connecting is not one of them. But when I do get kicked out, it's like the doors are shut, I'm in this dark room, and then suddenly, if I just keep working, another door opens. I just have to keep faith that if I keep working, that will happen. Thanks for asking that.
Thank you for sharing, and you certainly opened doors for us, and I'm so glad that we met and are now having a conversation together that's going to continue. And thank you everybody for joining us and for following the series perhaps, and certainly Laurie's work. And please do check out her films on our YouTube channel, and we're all going to be excited to see what comes next.
This was wonderful. And is it possible to get a copy of the chat? Because I haven't been looking at it and I'd love to see what people are saying.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm so grateful to you for seeing my work and having this vision. It's an extraordinary vision, and I couldn't have even imagined. If I were fantasizing something, it wouldn't have been this. This is good. This is so far beyond. So thank you so much, so much.
Thank you for sharing, Laurie.